Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I will call the December 13th Select Board meeting to order. I don't believe that there are any changes to the agenda, so we'll accept it as written.
Can I just, sorry, I just wanted to let you know that Brooke is remote tonight, so all your votes will have to be by roll call.
Yes, thank you. We'll move to announcements.
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The Finance Committee has its public hearing on the 2024 citizen warrant articles for the May 7th, 2024 annual town meeting. That is this Thursday, December 14th, tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and it is remote. I'm going to ask Erica to give a little update about the sewer force main project. We sort of had meant to have David here, but inadvertently forgot. But there's something happening that people should know about.
Yeah, so I believe the sign was already changed last week because they were supposed to be working this week, but Robert B. Our company, who's our contractor for the third sewer force main project, is going to be starting on Atlantic Ave on Monday. They'll be working approximately like 7 to 4 every day, but the road is going to be closed 24 hours a day, just like it was on Surfside Road. So you'll have to do detours around Atlantic Avenue. So that should start on Monday, and that's going to be like that for a little while. And RBO has already mobilized and has started down on Lily Street again. So we're going to have 2 crews working.
Is Lily Street entirely closed also?
Good question.
Okay.
It will be once they really get going. So I believe they started around number 22, but it's open for residents. Everybody knows the drill. They can come in the back, the wrong way if they need to, and police will get them through.
Same for Atlantic?
Yes.
Residents?
Yes.
And do you know how long Atlantic is closed until?
I don't.
Into the new year.
It's going to be a while. It's definitely going to be through the holidays. And
so we'll have David come in next week and give a full update, but this starts Monday. So don't try to go on Atlantic Avenue after Monday.
Exactly.
Are there any opening Select Board reports or comments? And Brooke, just interrupt me if you want to say.
No, I'm good. I have something for committee announcements, but nothing now.
Okay.
Committee.
Okay, hearing none. There's no follow-up from from public comment of prior Select Board meetings. And now we move to the public comment portion of our agenda. This is for things that are otherwise not on our agenda for discussion, and every topic is limited to 3 minutes.
Dawn, I'm sorry. Florencia is here. Libby, was she meant to do this during announcements?
I'm so sorry. Florencia, I'm really, really sorry. Yes.
Good. Okay, I'll hold public comment and go to you, Florencia.
Hi. Actually, if I can mention that the information about the road closures for Lily Street and Atlantic Ave are on the website, have been sent to the media. There are very clear maps that show what portion of the road is closed and until when. So, and it's in social media as well. So Atlantic's supposed to be until January 5th, if nothing has changed, and then Lily through May. But David will have the most updated information if anything changed in between now and a couple of days ago. So, but I am here to announce that now the town is offering over the phone interpreter services for residents that might not speak English as their first language. It's very simple now. Town employees are able to work in conference with an interpreter company called Global, and will be able to assist people that might prefer to speak in their first language rather than English. That's a service that we are starting to provide this week. We've been working with this company. This is the first year. They helped us translate the warrant in English into Spanish and Portuguese, and we hope that this service help people that might not feel comfortable calling the town because they were not able to communicate in their first language, and now they will be.
Brooke? Oh, go ahead.
Florencia, I saw an email come out. Did that go to all town employees about the availability of this service and how to use it? And
Yes.
will it also, I presume, will be accessible to first responders in the field as well?
Yes, we did send yesterday, I believe it was, for Tuesday, an email with instructions to all town employees. It's a very simple service. A person calls, the employee either calls or goes to an office speaking with, or it's with a first responder. The employee identifies that the person first language is not English, that they don't feel comfortable or they cannot communicate in English. So they call Global's phone number. I'm not going to say it because it is a town of Nantucket service for town of Nantucket employees. And they are put on hold for a brief moment while they are connected to an interpreter. And then there is a conference phone call where the town employee speaks directly to the The interpreter translates the message.
And I have one other question. It's important that town employees know that this is available, but I also wonder about outreach to the communities who don't, so they know it's available when they come into or are interacting with town employees, that they can ask for this service.
Yes, we have outreach plans. It just happens to be today. Haley and I are both sick, but we will be blasting it out in social media throughout the upcoming days, sending it out to key people in the community that will help us expand the message. We send it to the press, so hopefully we see some good outreach from others coming. The message has been translated into Spanish and Portuguese, which are the two other languages that are widely spoken in Nantucket, but this is a service to any language, not only Spanish and Portuguese.
Thank you, Florencia, for bringing this to fruition. I personally really appreciate it, and I think it's important for our community.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the announcement about it. I have not seen any hands raised for public comment. Okay, seeing none, there's no new business. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. No, approval of minutes and warrants is all we have. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor by roll call? Tom Dixon?
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
Aye.
Brooke Moore?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously, 1, 2, and 3. Citizen Departmental Committee requests and reports, Public Health Short-Term Rental Registration Platform Update. Good evening, Roberto.
Good evening. So just a really quick, brief update. There's a small presentation in the packet. I'll let Erica get it up and running. Okay. Can we zoom out for a little bit? Aha. Okay, so next slide is good. So just real quick, just so that we can, just for a reminder for everyone, our very first meeting with GovOS started on November 5th after we had canceled our contract with Granicus over the summer. Really quickly, they created a project management dashboard, which I have a screenshot of on a later slide, called Basecamp. Basecamp is a open dashboard. It's not open to the public. It's just for internal use right now, where we have to-do lists, timelines, communication with all of us, and the entire project team is on literally the same page. So what is really impressive is they're already keeping us up to date with this live dashboard every single day. On November 27th, we held the first compliance and registration framework meeting and the hotline creation that following Friday, so they're already working on we created the script for when somebody dials the hotline and calls in to do a complaint for short-term rentals. as well as what it was we were looking for. So that's the framework that we were talking about. So the permit applications and the letters are already in the works, actually. And then the final payment credentials were passed through on December 8th. Thank you to Brian and Mindy. And we should be moving forward. So really quick, next steps. That is the screenshot of what the base camp looks like. So it's on the very left, you'll see it says a message board where all the project team, we can communicate there. There's 5 of us on that team right now, 4 GovOS members and myself. And that's where we are in constant communication, passing information to each other. What you see in the very center is my to-do list has been met. So that's that green check mark. I am up to date. And then on the right is the documents and files. So right now, those 2 documents are the first warning letter and the compliance letter for anyone who, if we were to find a short-term rental, that's the first letter that people are going to be getting for short-term if it's not registered for that year. Right now, there is nothing really, no other meetings scheduled. So on the bottom left, the next schedule is not there because they're actually working on the website right now. They expect that website will be available for user acceptance testing sometime next week. And what we will do is send that back out to the committee, that 5-member committee that we used to pick the software. And it's been surprisingly effective so far. And then the last slide is what we're expecting is once UAT is over with those first 5 people, that once we get that link, I'll send it out to them, tell them, break it, go through it, do what you can, break it. They want to know what it is and where the shortfalls are. So we'll be sending it back out to the whole team. And then they expect to have the beta test full open, like the first live one that you guys will be able to see in January. And if you accept it, if you believe that it's good to go, and if the Board of Health believes it's good to go, we can launch the program in late January, early February. So it's a much faster timeline than we expected. And the good news is GovOS, one of the first things they told me when we had that first meeting, they told Brian and I, they've accepted a lot of customers from Granicus. So they know exactly where they failed and how they're fixing it. So that's why we're in such a quick process right now. So we're in a holding pattern until they get us the website, which they expect next week, but we're in good shape. So
That's great. Any questions, comments?
I think you've found an operation company rather than a sales company.
correct.
And I think you got the right ones. It's great.
Correct. What's interesting is recently the person who started the original host compliance company, the software that Granicus now owns, actually reached out to us to say, my apologies that this is happening. This is not the software I built. This is not the program, the company I started. I sold this to Granicus 5 years ago, and they've completely messed this up. So like it's apparently a big issue across the country that Granicus is kind of fumbling these programs. And GovOS, Deckard, another group, I forgot what it was called, they're all picking up Granicus drops.
Wow.
So it's an entire industry at this point of people that Granicus is losing.
Awesome. We'll stay tuned.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I'll keep everyone up to date as we move along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the town manager's report.
Does somebody have a question?
Oh, sorry. I lost that part of the screen.
It's Rebecca. Did you name?
Oh, yep, go ahead.
Yep, I appreciate the update from Roberto. It's great to hear that the short-term registration program is coming back online after the Granicus disaster. Is there a decision about what the deadline is going to be for completing registrations by SDR owners once the program is live?
Roberto.
Yes, the regulation does specifically say that you have to be registered by November 1st for the following calendar year. Because we're starting January 1st, we're just collecting information this coming year, 2024. We're not going to be hammering people. But everyone's going to be getting that first letter of you need to be brought into compliance up until November 1st. And then starting November 1st is when we'll actually start enforcing that timeline.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Next up, we have the town manager's report, FY 2025 general fund budget presentation.
Thank you. Settle in. This is going to take several hours, so bear with me. Okay. Section 4.2D3 of the town charter requires the town manager to prepare and submit to the select board an annual operating budget. You can just stay on the first slide for just a second. I don't want them to see what's coming just yet. The document that's in the board's packet is a summarized presentation containing an overview of updated projections, our recommendations, and next steps. The finance director and I will take you through it. We have a draft budget message which explains the recommendations, projections, and various issues in the budget. That document is currently in draft form. We are going to show it to you at the end of the presentation, but it is not entirely final yet. And it looks very similar to what you've seen in the past. Our fiscal 2025 budget process began with the review of preliminary projected expenses and revenues with the Finance Committee on September 12th, issuance of budget instructions to the departments on September 22nd, projection review with the board on September 27th, and review of every general fund and enterprise fund budget, departmental budget, plus the cabinet as a whole from mid-October through early December. Along the way, we've been taking in, seeking out, reviewing, researching, reconsidering, evaluating, or analyzing new or additional information. Okay, now slide 2. Our fiscal 2025 budget objectives include our standard objective, which is to keep the recommended operating budget within projected revenue, addressing priorities in the board's strategic plan with particular emphasis on the housing focus area, focusing resources on infrastructure maintenance, continuing to address the increasing importance of emerging and emerged areas under the sustainability category, including stormwater, coastal resiliency, and water quality, addressing staffing issues, including employee retention with a variety of strategies, and maintaining flexibility with the levy limit and use of free cash with the budget. In other words, we are trying not to spend every penny of our projected revenue. Economic indicators are uncertain, and we need to be able to stabilize if there's an economic downturn or if something unexpected arises. Next slide. Initiatives specific to the board's strategic plan that are recommended in the fiscal 25 budget and or are ongoing are shown on this slide. I know it's a little bit tiny to see, by focus area of the plan. We reviewed most of these at the board's October 23rd strategic planning workshop, so I'm not going to go through them again right now. Additional priorities are shown here. Now, these are not necessarily immediately linked to items specific in the fiscal 2025 general fund budget, but they may be or will be in the near term. We have begun to determinatively, I'm not sure that's a word, but that's the word I came up with, to plan for the new Our Island Home facility with engagement of an owner's project manager, a designer, and a work group that is assisting with program planning, outreach, engagement with the neighbors, and we will have a more complete update for you on this project at your meeting next week. The Parks Master Plan continues to be synced to the Coastal Resiliency Plan. Significant effort is being put into maintaining the parks facilities and areas and developing projects contained in the Parks Master Plan, including the Tom Nevers Burn debris removal project, planning for the implementation of other items in the plan, completion of funded projects, including the Nobodere Field House, and now we are planning field and other improvements at the Nobodere site as recently approved by voters. Baxter Road alternative access. The board is very familiar with this, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it, other than it's an important project. It's requiring a fair amount of staff time and could require significantly more depending on what happens with the erosion control project. At last year's presentation, and perhaps even since then, we reported that we were working on a plan to relocate the DPW campus to property under the jurisdiction of the airport near the Delta property. At the Delta property, basically. After reviewing that with the board, mitigation requirements, space needs, and rent that would need to be paid to the airport, we have shifted our focus to the town-owned property at 1 Shadbush Road, which is also where the Hunting Association has been planning a shooting range facility. This location is preferable for traffic reasons, size, and siting. We have had preliminary discussions with the Hunting Association and believe that the two facilities can be co-located. Currently, design of the DPW facility is getting finalized. With the board's support, we hope to bid the project next fall and potentially go to a special town meeting next fall for an appropriation. I wanted to thank Matt for continuing to be a strong proponent to review the 1 Shadbush site, because it does look as if that is very viable. So thank you, Matt, for keeping us on track with that. While the Surfside area water main extension and transportation improvements and roadway project is well underway, it will be underway for multiple years and requires significant additional capital funding. It is also requiring a significant amount of staff time, multiple staff to manage. There have been numerous obstacles with this project, including utility placements, easement acquisitions, additional design requirements for stormwater, and additional state permitting requirements, contractor and supply delays, but we're trying to keep it on track as best we can. Capital planning and program and project management remain priorities, and because it has been difficult to dedicate resources not already committed to other functions to give projects the attention required, we're having to rely and engage and rely on outside consultants and engineers, which also require oversight. We're in the process of advertising for a project manager position, which would be contained within town administration. DPW has a vacant town-funded town engineer position, which would have a major role with DPW project management, and we're hoping to get that position out and advertised within the next month or two. Public safety staffing is always a concern. Additional funding is recommended in the fiscal 25 budget for additional positions in the fire department. With the completion of collective bargaining with the police and fire unions this year and the associated compensation increases, we anticipate that recruiting and retention of public safety staff will be more successful. Somerset Sewer Extension is one of our so-called collision projects that we reviewed with the board in September. We are seeking design funding at the 2024 annual town meeting, and there are associated tasks to the project, including determining what other infrastructure can be improved or installed at the same time as the eventual installation of the sewer extension, such as stormwater, roadway, or multi-use path improvements. There are also property acquisitions that will be needed for at least one pump station. And when I get to the town meeting update a little bit later, there are a couple of real estate acquisitions that haven't appeared on there yet that are probably going to be put forward at the town meeting in connection with this project. Management of town-controlled housing has become extremely time-consuming for several staff people. Over the summer, we worked on restructuring the housing and real estate offices to be clearer about who does what with regard to the management of housing, both owned and rented, including maintaining a list of employees who need housing, rent collection, rent setting, maintenance, utilities, particular requirements of the housing, such as home owners association conditions. We are currently advertising for a rental property manager, and we hope that will help alleviate the strain on multiple staff and centralize these sorts of tasks with one position. Next slide. Retention of town employees remains a dedicated focus. Staffing deficiencies and shortages are real across the region and country. Our situation is obviously exacerbated by housing challenges and high cost of living. We have a variety of measures we are working to initiate, continue, or expand, and these are shown on this slide. Compensation issues have been addressed in our collective bargaining contracts and with non-union staff, and we will continue to review our compensation to try to ensure that it remains competitive. These increases in compensation will have long-term impacts on the budget, which is another reason to be cautious with revenue and spending projections. Brian is going to take us through the next 6-ish slides.
Can I go back just one slide?
Sure.
One of the things I've been thinking about, it's one thing, well, it's a sort of a general comment. It's the one before this. It was sort of, we need project management, and then we're hiring people, we're hiring a new person, or we hire an outside firm, but you still have to sort of stay on top of them anyway. I'm wondering if it should be a separate entity, a separate department with somebody who's already here and, and we backfill their position, somebody here that knows everything and it's going to just flow to them anyway. And somehow make it's going to be important enough. There's what, $800 million worth of stuff to do in the next 10 or 15 years. It's not going to get done if we don't sort of figure out how to get it done, So
Yeah.
it was just something I've thought about a couple of times, and instead of one person's at the DPW and two are at planning and one's at your office and one's somewhere else, is there a way to consolidate that? Anyway.
Well, that's an excellent point. And I think that's what we are hoping to achieve with a project management division or office within town administration. And while the positions associated with, so the project manager position that we are advertising now would be, I think, the person that the position you're sort of referring to, and would work with the DPW the town engineer / project manager, and certainly the transportation planner in planning. He doesn't necessarily manage construction projects. Those are the bigger projects that we're talking about, but obviously there are plans and projects that come out of plans. So the idea is to have, you'll see this later in the presentation, a centralized software application that would enable us to more centrally administer all of the projects. So I think we're getting at what you are suggesting, Matt, but it's going to take a little while to get there.
Yeah, and I think you're going to need a strong head to run this. So otherwise, it's just going to be a new hire who's going to be asking 20 questions every hour. And so you've got to, anyway.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
2 slides forward, Erica, please. Thank you. So town administration, in the work that we've done since the September presentation, we've determined or projecting that we have the ability to raise $152,389,000. What you'll see throughout this presentation in expenses, we're recommending projected expenses of $152,252,000, which as of today would leave us $136,000 of unused levy capacity, which is not an awful lot given the fact that we have 5.5 months to go before we get to the annual town meeting. If something were to happen, it would potentially cause us to have to go back and reconfigure a lot of things depending on the size of the issue that we were trying to deal with. So that is one word of caution that I give as we go through this, that we would have liked to have seen a little bit more, but there's a lot of priorities that town administration is recommending being addressed. So it's a balance to try to do both at this point still. Next slide, please. This slide breaks down the revenue. We're projecting $121 million in property taxes, about $5 million in local receipts, everything other than what's in here, which does include penalties and interest. It includes investment income, things of that nature. Motor vehicle excise, we're projecting 3.9. We collected in excess of $4.4 million last year. So a lot of that is prior year collections, but we're still confident that 3.9, we are on track to exceed that again this year at this point. So we are comfortable with that number right now. Rooms and meals tax of 14.5 million. The majority of that would be our projection for rooms tax. One note, we will be receiving the second payment on December 30th, which will give us a very clear focus of how this year will go. The first quarter, we received a little over $7 million. So we still are trending in an upward trajectory on that right now. License and permits, 1.9 million. State aid projected to be 4,822,000. That is consistent with what we actually are going to receive in 24 after the legislature and the governor adopted a budget. Free cash, we're recommending $819,000 this year. And then other available funds that are programmed into this is the $175,000 from the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund for substance abuse. On the expenditure side, 39 million for municipal departments, 40 million for the school department. We had extensive conversations with the school as they've gone through the same challenges we've gone through in terms of salaries and structure changes there. So they did ask for 40 million this year, which we have been able to recommend funding for right now. Non-departmental of 42 million, which is all of our insurances, health insurance, our general liabilities, our retirement assessments, our debt service, and then special appropriations of 29.4 million, which is all the other articles through the budget, including all the enterprise fund transfers that be affordable housing trusts, stormwater, solid waste, and our island home. Next slide, please, Erica. We do always like to just kind of point out where the largest revenue sources are. Obviously, the first, as is for most, if not all communities in Massachusetts, is the tax revenue. For us, rooms and meals tax is the second largest at 10%, and then all others are under 3% in total in individual categories. Next slide. Expenditures, school and town are roughly pretty equal at 28 and 27%, and then you have 19% for special appropriations, and then 28% of the pie is related to non-departmental, being things that are outside a lot of our control, being debt service, retirement calculations, and insurances. Did you have a question, Matt? Oh, okay. You look like I thought you did. So
No.
okay. So
I'm
here
just trying to be polite and not turn my back the whole time.
Okay. So here I'll kind of take you through where the recommended expenditures are in the amounts that we're recommending. Operational expenses within the town budget, 10.9 million. Included in that 10.9 million is $1 million of operational expense increase requests. Town salaries of 28,687,000 does include recommended new personnel positions in the amount of 931,000. That 28 million does include all currently approved labor agreements. There is one outstanding, but all other ratified agreements have been included in that number. The school asked for $6.8 million in operational expenditures. They've asked for 400,000 in one-time expenses. Since that is coming from free cash, we were able to recommend that. And their school salaries of 33,345,000 does include all currently ratified new collective bargaining agreements for their side as well. Yes.
Just a comment, personnel, the new personnel, if I have got this right, half of it was to the fire department, 4 new hires and 100,000 of overtime?
Yes.
If I got that right, so they're about half?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which we'll take through in more detail when we get to
okay.
that, but yes, that you are correct.
Yeah, all right. Sorry, I didn't,
No, that's
but I think it's important for people to know that with yeah.
absolutely. Next slide, please, Erica. So health insurance, we're projecting about a 10% increase. Medical rate inflation right now is trending in between 8.5% and 9%. We thankfully are trending a little bit lower than that, but again, we still have a little over 7 months of the year to go. So we hopefully it won't change dramatically, but for active employees, 13.4 million, and for retirees, $4.4 million in projected costs. General insurance, 4,693,000. It's about a 14.7% increase right now. However, we hopefully that'll be enough. We've been put on notice that they are going to be really looking at the values you're assigning to all of your property, which is the largest part of our insurance. And we've been working very diligently with our consultants to try to come up with a plan to mitigate any increases, any substantial increases. Debt service of 12,447,000. That is per the waterfall schedule. It is a decrease of about $1.9 million over last year. We expect it'll stabilize at about $12 million annually for a few years before any of the large scale projects get added. And we're tempering back our permanent borrowing right now, given the interest rate environment that we're in. Retirement increase is 7,044,000. That's 8.5% over the actual retirement assessment that we received for the current fiscal year of fiscal 24. And then enterprise fund subsidies in total, $23,405,000 between Ireland Home, Solid Waste, Stormwater, and Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Next slide, please, Erica. Now the recommendations for the special appropriation articles: mosquito control, 185,000, which is standard 2.5% increase. Health and Human Services, 825,000, 175,000 of that to come from the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund. And we are recommending at this point the same 650,000 that we've been recommending for the last few years. County assessment, we're projecting $183,552, which is a 2.5% increase. Reserve fund, no change at the same 500,000. Unpaid bills shows as a 100% decrease because at this, as of the printing of this, we had none. In the last day, we got one, so we will have a small one, but we don't expect that it'll be as large as it was last year. Other post-employment benefits, through the raise and appropriate, we are recommending 500,000. There is another recommendation a little bit further that we will detail for you relative to other post-employment benefits. Affordable Housing Trust, the additional $1,013,000, consistent with last year because we have not completed the full borrowing authorization from the original $1.6 million. So we continue to allocate that as we have in the past. Overlay and other deficits, we have not had any and we don't project any. Cherry sheet charges, which is the offset to the revenue that we receive. The majority of our cherry sheet charges are related to the NRTA. And then some special education funding, which is an offset that the state charges us for, $1,461,000. That is consistent with what we are being charged this year. We don't expect a dramatic increase in that, but that is what, to the best of our knowledge, the starting point for this year. Community school, the same $600,000 that we have been providing to them, to the school for the transfer to the community school on an annual basis. And then minimum capital funding requirement, $1,589,000. This is 1% of all real and personal property tax revenue that is collected in the prior year, as well as local estimated receipts. This number is up about a little over $230,000, I believe, over last year, as our local estimated receipts have continued to go on an upward trajectory. This number has continued to increase in conjunction with that. All told, $152,252,000 of recommended expenditures. Next slide, please. I'm on this one, right? I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the town manager will take you through the what was recommended to go into this budget, but I would just like to point out that there were $2,799,000 of requests from town departments. Does not include any school request to the superintendent. One time totaled $579,000, and ongoing was $2,220,000. Town administration has been able to recommend $2,341,000, with one-time expenses being $419,000, and then ongoing expenses of $1,923,000. Next slide, please. And this is where the town manager will take you through and what was recommended.
Thanks, Brian. Recommendations for our expense increase requests are based on the following criteria: whether or not it's a legal mandate, high prioritization given for requests that support the board's strategic plan and or are recommended in a 2018 staffing study, whether or not it improves a department's operations and efficiency, if it's necessary to support new programming, necessary to support existing programming, or provides continuity of operations. And we rank each one using a point system. I want to make a note about the EIRs. We have received a significant number of these, and while we have actually funded or are recommending funding for many of them, we cannot fund all of them. And we have to take the big picture into consideration. We're fortunate to be able to fund what we are recommending, if that's the way it goes. The revenue increase from the room occupancy tax is allowing us to put forward recommendations to address areas which cannot progress without additional resources. However, you're going to hear this over and over from myself and Brian. We must caution that we exercise conservative use of this revenue. For one thing, some of the budget items being recommended are ongoing and will require continued funding into the future. Secondly, we believe this funding source is still not at the point where the amount received in fiscal 23, so far in fiscal 24, and even being projected for fiscal 25 can be fully relied on to remain at those levels due to economic impacts out there that we cannot control, and possible changes in how short-term rentals are regulated in Nantucket. As we know, there are pending warrant articles, litigation, things like that. Okay, so on the personnel side, we are putting forward 10 new positions with an additional 2 under review. I won't go through every single one of these, but the new positions include positions that will be necessary to implement board goals or are needed to focus on town infrastructure and project management deficiencies, as well as positions needed to maintain a level of municipal services that a growing community such as ours requires, including public safety and planning. The 2 positions that we are still trying to deal with internally include a paralegal in the real estate office and a town committee coordinator. The town committee coordinator is a position that we actually funded 4 or 5 years ago, and that position has essentially turned into the public records access officer and spends the bulk of time on public records requests rather than committee coordination. We need to really focus on getting our committees into a training program, including conflict of interest, open meeting law, public records, how to run a meeting, how to post a meeting, and regulating public comment properly. There's some litigation out there that we are at risk with dealing with if we aren't consistent in the application of centralized policies.
So Libby, you're saying basically there's a full-time person on public requests for information requests?
Yes,
Full-time,
full-time.
40 hours?
Yep.
Okay.
Public records requests are daily, multiple,
Right.
and all the records have to be gathered. We have a program that you can use keywords and it pulls up the records, but they have to be gone through basically individually to see if they're public or not and sorted out. Okay, I think next slide.
I have one question.
Oh,
Madam Chair.
sure.
I mean, the Board of Health has requested additional screening medical care for firefighters. Does that include in this slide, or will that be elsewhere?
That is not included in our budget projection. The Board of Health doesn't really have jurisdiction over that, and that was not a budget request that was submitted. However, the fire chief is in active discussions with the fire union about that program.
Because we can make it a budget request. I mean, we made a request and it's going to cost money.
Well, if the Board of Health wants to do that, I guess you could put that forward, but it's well past the time for monetary requests, and it is going to cost some money, but it also has to be negotiated.
Well, that request was made 6 weeks ago, almost 2 months ago.
It was not a budget request that came through the normal budget request process. And quite frankly, I didn't take it as a budget. It wasn't in any kind of format that.
Well, I think we're dancing around here. I mean,
Well-
if we make a request, it's going to cost money. So it's a budget request.
There was no number, there was no parameters, there was no indication of a funding source.
Well, it's not the Board of Health's duty to find the funding source. I think that's the town's duty.
If the Board of Selectmen, Select Board, wants to put that forward, they can instruct town administration to put it forward.
Well, I would like to make a motion that the Board of Selectmen or select people requests that be included in the budget.
Can we maybe modify that to find out what the cost is and what the options are? Because I don't know anything about this, so I'm not ready to vote for
Well-
that, but I just have no idea what you've been talking about in terms of dollars.
We did make a request to the fire chief and the town manager, and we did copy the select board on that request.
Okay.
And we never really got much of an answer from it.
That's because it is subject to collective bargaining, and that isn't a public process.
Yeah, I think, may I, Don?
Oh, yes, go ahead, Brooke.
Yeah, having been part of collective bargaining, this topic has come up. There's some complications around what the members, the details of this and what a program like this would look like, and it is subject to collective bargaining. So I'm not sure it's as much of a straight line as it might appear. And I believe that conversation is ongoing as to what parameters for such a program the union would accept. And I'm not sure procedurally how to fund something that is as yet undefined.
Yeah, do we have any idea what the cost is?
No.
And here's the other thing that we would have to come up with. It may be that some of this is covered by insurance already, and it might also be that since we're self-funded, that we could insure it via, an additional cost, which we'd have to find out. And, so depending, so there's things like that too, that I think, we're self-funded. So there's things like that, and there may be more efficient ways to get at the same thing, but the work has to be done. So would be my suggestion is that we look into that.
Well, we're going to look into it. Who's going to look into it?
That's kind of why I'm trying to figure out how a motion to that effect should be crafted. That's not just let's put it in the budget when we don't have a dollar figure. I think just a suggestion.
All right, well, as
I'm trying to be
I certainly don't want to
supportive
put
of-
something in a budget without a dollar figure. I'm just a little upset, and I think my fellow Board of Health members will be upset that this kind of languished for a period of time without a real response. And so maybe in that time, we could have gotten some budget figures.
It requires bargaining, is really all I can say. And until that is complete, we had nothing to recommend.
So we have an important issue that's just kind of floating around.
No, we have an important issue that's been brought forward, that's been brought to the union, and discussions are underway.
Do we have a time figure or when we'd have some kind of resolution?
I guess it depends on when people get back to each other. And again, as this has been discussed here, it's really not as simple as putting X dollars into a budget to cover cancer screening. There's many unanswered questions about exactly what screenings are to be undertaken, who the results are given to.
How often?
Well, actually, the Firefighters Association actually has a recommendation for that whole procedure.
Then they should give it to the union.
Well, I think they should
And-
have it. It's not magical. I mean, obviously, some of it would be paid by normal health insurance, but there's certain tests and so forth that the Firefighters Association has recommended, and it's been done elsewhere. So,
Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
think
we're always supposed to be the leaders. I keep hearing how we're the leaders, and here I feel like we're being followers. So,
I don't know where that's coming from. There are programs out there, and it's at the bargaining table. If the chief wants to give a little update, sure.
Thank you, Libby. So I have met with the union as recently as a couple days ago, and they've come forward with various plans, whether it's a cancer screening, whether it's an NFPA annual physical. So they really haven't decided firmly on what they're looking for. And so we frankly haven't ironed out any of those details, as well as once it's done, what's covered, what's not covered, how is it covered, and who gets the results, basically. So I think we're in the middle of negotiating all that. It certainly hasn't been dismissed, but I don't think we're in a position where I can give a number on what something like that would cost, and I certainly don't think we're at that point yet.
You think it's probably a positive thing that will be sorted fairly, would you say, if you had to guess?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's something positive that should be done, and we probably will do. but-
Yeah, I mean, we've had good discussions about it, and I think we're
Yeah.
both sides, I think, are trying to get to the right spot.
Yeah.
But, there's back and forth.
all right, fine. So I will withdraw my motion, and we will encourage the union and the chief and the fire department to find some resolution to this, because I don't think it's that. Things often appear complicated, but it's not that complicated because it's been done before. And I will report to my fellow board members what we discussed. They're a little upset that we really didn't get any feedback
So,
when we should have.
well, I apologize on that if I missed it, but this is something that's already been instituted in other communities?
Yes.
Okay. So it's, and is it something like more, where there's more routine screening? Of
Yes, it's more-
like an MRI or a PET scan?
Well, I
things
mean,
that
it doesn't,
aren't
doesn't
readily
necessarily
paid
have to go,
for?
doesn't have to go that far. It'd essentially be a guaranteed yearly physical exam with certain other additional tests. But we will let the union and the fire chief work this out.
Okay.
And I look forward to having a report soon about how the progress is going.
And sometimes these things do look easy, but you know, there is, like the turnout gear is a good one. That was something that we could do. We did, it was supposed to be bargained. We didn't even bargain it. We just did the right thing, and Libby found the money for 2 years in a row and took 1 or 2 years. Or Brian found the money. Somebody smart found the money.
It was Brian.
And we did the right thing, but this is a little bit more complicated than that. So, but I trust that we will get through it and do the right thing.
Okay.
But I'm also glad that you're staying on it, Malcolm, because it will help us get there.
Any other questions about this slide? Okay.
No.
Okay, on the expense side, we are recommending one-time expenses to address funding for communications-related issues, including community surveys, an increase in funding for translation services, education and compliance outreach for the Natural Resources Department and Health and Human Services programs, a replacement vehicle for town administration. This would be an electric vehicle and would replace a hand-me-down, which is nearly 15 years old. If possible, we would secure a grant to offset the cost. We are seeking funding for grant application, professional services, and support. Internally, we have extensively discussed a grant coordinator or grant writer position. The issue is that many grants require expertise in grant writing for the particular area the grant would be funding, such as sustainability, energy, engineering, infrastructure, housing, those sorts of things. It's pretty wide-ranging. The acquisition of grants also does not address our ongoing project management deficit. We cannot manage all of the projects we have now, and that problem could be exacerbated by the receipt of grants for projects that aren't in the queue, which typically have timing and other requirements. We have had success with existing staff seeking and securing grants for projects that are in our capital improvement plan. We would like to try to use this proposed funding to help engage professional grant writers as needed for grants that arise, which could help fund planned projects, and continue to evaluate whether or not a grant writing position is necessary. In order to further our project management capabilities, as I mentioned earlier, we are seeking funding for projects tracking software that would be managed by the project manager we hope to hire. The town clerk has some one-time expenses in fiscal '25 due to the additional election events that are associated with the presidential election. Next. Okay, we have a significant number of ongoing expense requests, and these almost entirely address programs and initiatives related to the board's strategic plan, costs associated with additional new employees such as uniforms, training.
I'm unable to hear anything.
Can you hear now, Brooke?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Okay.
The screen went black for a minute.
Okay.
So we're proposing to fund the $2.3 million in expense increase requests with one-time free cash for the one-time expenses of $417,900 and tax levy and other general revenues within the general fund budget of $1,923,000. Next slide, please. Typically, we've always given you a recommendation on what we propose to use free cash for. It was certified at $22,066,000 the beginning of November. Funding, obviously, as I just noted, the one-time expense increase request on the town side, $417,000. As everyone will remember, at the November 7th special town meeting, we had supplemental funding for the seasonal housing that we're proposing to build of $3,200,000. Expense increase request on the school side, $400,000. Town and school capital project requests, $12,577,000. We are currently going through that continued process with Capcom. We also are proposing to continue to allocate some money to the stabilization fund in the amount of $1 million. The capital stabilization, an additional $1 million into that. The other post-employment stabilization fund, which funds all of the leave buyouts that are contractually obligated for employees, $750,000. That obligation is close to $3 million, and this $750,000 would give us $2.2 million in that fund. So we're working steadily to have that fully covered, so it does not create a hit to additional charges or expenses within the general fund itself. And then an additional $500,000 into the OPEB trust fund. All told, if we allocated all of the free cash as recommended here, we would still leave unallocated and available to potentially fund any changes that became necessary of $2,220,000. We have recommended within this budget, pursuant to our financial policies, everything here is one-time expenses or capital, as our policy suggests is the best use of free cash.
Can I have a question? So is that an additional 500 or is that to the?
That's
OPEB?
an additional 500. So we're for OPEB, we're recommending raising the 500 that we consistently do through raise and appropriate. This would be an additional 500. So the total appropriation in for this year would be an additional one. It would be $1 million.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I had written that down as one of my thoughts. I didn't know you'd done that. And the way I was thinking about it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it's one way to pay that down now. So when other costs are higher later, we have a little more leeway. Is that kind of the thinking? Or?
We do. I mean, one of the recommendations that the board agreed to is that once the it's going to take a very long time to fund OPEB. I mean, we have about an $88 million unfunded liability, so it's going to take a long time to get there. So the thinking is, with free cash at the level it is, it's good to continue to show progress towards it, and it also maintains the consistency within the budget. But as you remember, during COVID, we did stop that for 1 year. So this is kind of making sure that should something happen that we wouldn't be able to raise it, we don't lose a lot of traction.
Right.
Thanks, Brian. Outstanding items and current unknowns are shown here. State aid is always somewhat of a concern, and while the state has not finalized its budget yet for fiscal '25, we are projecting a level funding for that funding source. None of the citizen warrant articles have been included in our recommendations. Some of these, if approved and determined to be implemented, could have a cost impact which has not been analyzed fully at this point. If any of the items are approved by voters and they are determined by the board to proceed or be implemented, funding will either not be immediately available or priorities will have to shift. And this is typically how we handle any cost associations with citizen warrant articles. As mentioned earlier, we do not believe we have had yet what could be considered a normal year of short-term rental revenue since the expansion of the room occupancy tax to short-term rentals in 2019. The impact of any potential future town regulations or pending litigation outcomes is obviously unknown right now. Supply chain and labor issues are having a noticeable impact on certain areas of town operations and projects such as parts and equipment, including vehicles, and this is not unique to Nantucket. The costs of the projects contained in the Coastal Resiliency Plan, as we know, are rather astronomical, and we will need to prioritize these and seek alternate sources of funding where available, as we have started to do with most recently a grant that Natural Resources worked to secure for the downtown flood barrier planning. We have a significant time investment into the preparations for the expiration of the waste services agreement for the solid waste operation. We are planning a comprehensive review of these efforts for a board workshop, which is currently scheduled for January 11th. While we have a retirement assessment projection, we have not actually received notification from the Barnstable County Retirement Association as to what it specifically is, but we feel pretty confident of our projection. Okay, a number of future potential costs are listed on this slide, and some have already been covered in the presentation. We have numerous plans in place or are in the process of being updated or started. All of them contain projects that will have a cost impact. Some overlap and some can be combined. We have discussed employee retention and housing. In addition to town employee housing, community workforce housing is also an ongoing goal and has associated costs. There are numerous parallel efforts at work with affordable housing. While we now have an IT position dedicated to cybersecurity, the cost could be enormous if the town system becomes compromised from a cybersecurity attack. It is worth routinely noting the need to be vigilant with cybersecurity, and that goes for not just town employees, but those committee, board, and commission members who have town email addresses. The fiscal year, the 5-year, general fund forecast is a forward-looking projection as to what mandates, requirements, replacements, changes in plan, or other costs we might be facing in the near future. And we try to take a look at this annually as to what is coming down the road. Regulatory or other unfunded mandates may arise which require resources. Solid waste we reviewed. NRTA service modifications could have a potential impact on the general fund budget through the state assessment to the town. The state, I think the NRTA administrator mentioned this recently, the state is undertaking a pilot program for free public transit service throughout the state. And eventually that could impact our state assessment depending on how the state is intending to fund that gap of revenue. PFAS costs remain a high concern and also largely unknown, but regulatory requirements are on the way from the state and/or federal government, which may necessitate significant capital and/or operating costs in the fairly near future. We mentioned Baxter Road alternative access earlier, but I noted again here because it is really a very active project. One area not shown here, which I wanted to mention, it deserves a little attention, is real estate. We have many more initiatives underway or pending than we have staff resources for currently, including the yard sale program, leases and licenses, which include requests, monitoring, processing, management, encroachments, general monitoring of town property for misuse or future use. As mentioned earlier, however, we are working on how to get these issues more effectively dealt with existing funded positions. We are not, and this isn't also, well, it is a little mentioned there at the bottom, operational costs of expanding new facilities. We don't know what additional operational costs there may or may not be with expanded and/or new facilities, although we know there will be some. It depends on what they are. If they are replacement facilities, such as Our Island Home or DPW, there may not be much of a cost increase from the existing facilities because of energy and other efficiencies that would be built into the new facilities. Completely new facilities, though, will obviously have operational impacts, which will have to be funded.
Can I comment on a couple of those before
sure.
we move on? Yeah. One is, I always talk about betterments, and it's, it goes over very poorly. I pushed for betterments out in Surfside when the project was $2 million. It was a private road, and I thought it should have come up to code completely, or it should have been 50-50 bettered at least. I didn't get anywhere. But now that it's a $20 million project, it's, it looks like I wish we really had done it. If we're going to if we're going to spend $800 million, as unpopular as betterments might be, I think we really need to focus and look at them, because we will not have the capacity to do them. And the properties that are there are valued with those, it's built into the properties. So that's number one. I just have to say that. On coastal resiliency, I think we have to assume that we're going to pay most of it ourselves. I don't think that, I hope that there's going to be a big federal money and other things. I think there will be a lot of it available. And if we could do as well as the new NRTA director has done at working that, we may get some. But I think there's going to be a lot of, it's going to be a lot of big tickets for Boston and New York and other areas, and we're going to have a tough time. So we have to think about how do we pay for that with, with the people who are getting the benefit paying and et cetera. And I know we're working on that. And then the other part about it was the NRTA, if we eventually do adopt paid parking in the areas that are under, sort of under high demand and charge, close to market rates, we will have open spaces and we will have plenty of money to run the NRTA. And so we need to, that's another third rail that nobody wants to talk about, but we need to think about. So I didn't bring this for that reason, but I'm thinking about it. So those are the 3 comments on that screen.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Matt. That's actually very helpful to hear. This slide just is next steps. We're going to the school committee on January 9th with pretty much this budget presentation, a little bit reduced probably. The board has its annual budget public hearing on January 10th. And at that meeting, we hope the board will endorse a recommended fiscal 2025 general fund budget that we would then forward to the finance committee, who will then begin reviewing it along with warrant articles mid-January through mid-March. Tuesday, May 7th, we have our annual town meeting, and Tuesday, May 21st, the annual town election. Most likely there will be some ballot questions for debt exclusions at town meeting. I wanted to just show you what the budget message looks like and what it sort of contains. So, yeah. So that's the cover. And sort of just scan through, Erica, and I'll just kind of point some stuff out. There's a table of contents. There's a letter to the board, which is from the town manager about the budget, and a lot of narrative about challenges, plans, funding, revenue. There's a solid waste section. We try to focus on particular areas that we are going to be focusing resources on and explain those in some detail. There's charts and things, comparisons to prior years, an explanation of how the expense increase requests are developed, and you can sort of keep skimming through. Coastal resiliency, a section on collective bargaining, some of the initiatives that are underway. And so, if the board has a chance at some point, please read through it and let us know if you have any comments, because we would want that to get finalized on or about January 10th as well. I really wanted to thank all of the town department heads. They've been very cooperative and helpful with their budget submittals and discussions, and staff who have put this budget together, which takes a very significant amount of time. And I want to specifically acknowledge Sue Carmel, our assistant finance director, who stepped in due to a maternity leave. Although the person on maternity leave, Maria Basheva, did a lot of advance work, so I definitely want to recognize her. Our finance director, Brian Turbett, and our assistant town managers, Greg Tivnan and Rick Sears. Everybody contributed a great deal to this budget, and it is arguably the biggest thing that we do in town administration annually. So I want to really acknowledge that. It's a lot of work. And we're happy to answer any questions the board might have. This is on your agenda again next week. Typically, we have it on, typically we present and then have it on your next meeting in case, things come up or you have been able to think about things a little bit more, that kind of thing.
Any other thoughts for this evening?
It is hugely improved. It gets a little better every year, Libby, and it's miles away from where we were 20 years ago. So it's, I think you guys should take a bow. I was looking for pictures in it. There's not a lot of pictures. I was thinking maybe Brian or you, but yeah, we want a picture,
We could get some action photos.
There's
of Brian.
some people don't read a lot of it, so.
Yeah, more pictures would be better. Thank you, Matt.
Well, thank you. We know it's a tremendous amount of work, and it's recognized. Do we want to move on to discussion about town meeting warrant articles?
Okay, so again, what I've been trying to do is just highlight sort of the outstanding items, and I am really trying to get a draft warrant started and have it for you probably your first meeting in January to start getting through it. So general bylaws, the e-bike, e-scooter kind of thing is still being worked on, as I understand it, by BPAC. Rental car bylaw. So we have discussed this a couple of times now and requested requested town council come up with an amendment to address the surplus rental vehicle medallion issue and the Turo issue. So there is a recommendation that actually was contained in Brian Riley's email from last week as to a potential wording change in the bylaw. Brian, I know Brian is on, maybe you could just go over that specifically, because we didn't really get specifically at it last week. And I think it's not necessarily a strong recommendation from the point of view of whether it's legally valid or would be upheld by the Attorney General.
Okay. Yeah, I can address that. I had proposed basically just something in the definition section that says, a quote rental would include, using one of these car sharing or peer-to-peer companies that are out there. I am trying to figure out through the Attorney General's office, as I mentioned in the opinion I sent, town meeting originally adopted Chapter 58, I think it is, the car rental statute in May of 1988. And then there was a special act of the legislature in July of 89, which essentially said the town of Nantucket has authority to adopt bylaws and charge fees for car rentals. And this act, or what happened in the May 1988 town meeting, is hereby ratified. So I want to try and figure out from the Attorney General's office why. I assume that's the advice came from that office to say, you really can't do this. You should get a special act. I don't know why. It doesn't seem to be inconsistent with state law, but I'm hoping to hear back from that office, the ones that approve the bylaws, shortly. And the other thing which you may have seen just this afternoon is two things. One, I received an email from the government, government relations, I think, manager of Turo, which seems to be the big company that is behind these peer-to-peer car sharing arrangements, asking to, let's talk about the issues that are in Nantucket. And today I also reached out to the attorney for the airport, because as you may know, they sent a letter basically saying, stop using airport property for this until we, can work something out. And so the attorney there for the airport said she's also received a reach out from Turo. So we're trying to coordinate something, hopefully by middle of next week, to have a Zoom and hear what they have to say, and they can hear what we have to say, which is, we're concerned. It's perhaps that Nantucket is fairly unique in having one of these bylaws, but we do have it, and it says what it says, and find out what Turo's position might be on that. So a couple of things up in the air right now. We'll certainly try to, tell you where things stand, where we think stand, and what Turo's position is in the near future, well ahead of town meeting. But that's where it sits right now.
My sense is that we have it because we have a limited number of roads. We can't add to them. Coastal resiliency, we're going to lose roads. I think it was, we were forward thinking then and didn't want to become Orlando or Hawaii. And so I think we put it in place, for those reasons. We couldn't widen our whole downtown. We can't even widen our collector roads. And so I think that there was valid reasons we did it. I hope our position would be this is illegal. That's why we're writing to you. And, at least stake that position out and see what comes out of it would be my hope. But
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm sure that was what was behind the bylaw originally. And we do have this special act which sort of blessed it. So, that will be, our position going in, certainly.
We have a public hand up. It's listed as Becky's Broncos. Go ahead and speak if you could just identify yourself with your full regular name.
Hi, this is Rebecca McCrensky. I own Becky's Broncos with my husband, James Broad. We also own Positivity, which is the dog store in town. We've been in town 6 years. We make all of our products in Boston. One of the only entirely locally made companies. And we started this Becky's Broncos this year because we felt that there weren't enough fairly priced and really unique car rental companies available on Nantucket. We tried to start this business the correct way. I think it's frankly a cop-out to say that traffic is the issue here and that the town in 1988 had foresight for this when there have been 90,000 additional cars on the car ferry since the late 70s. And we're talking about 700 rental car medallions, and there's 90,000 additional cars being transported on the ferry. Can we really say that the rental cars are the problems on island in terms of traffic?
Point taken. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay.
Okay, so waiting for more on that. And I'm waiting for a little bit more on some other things. Coastal resiliency districts, there may be a draft that is coming in my email from town council, but I honestly did not have a chance to get at it today. The year-round housing deed restriction program, I have a note there waiting on Affordable Housing Trust. Actually, I do have a draft of that now. I have not had a chance to send it out to the board, but I will do that hopefully before the end of the week. And that is really all that is new. I'll have another update of this next week.
Okay. Anything else on town meeting? Okay, to be continued. Last thing on our agenda is committee reports. I know Brooke has something.
Yep. Hi, I spent a good chunk of yesterday, was that yesterday? Yes, yesterday with a really large group of department heads, town employees, crossing all sectors of our work on PFAS. It was the second PFAS summit, the first of which was held February of this year. And again, the collaborative conversation around what we know about PFAS, what we don't know about PFAS, what we're doing to understand and mitigate, and also to anticipate changes in regulations at the federal and state level, and to respond to testing, well testing, private well testing, public well testing programs, and really keeping a really thorough dialogue around this emerging issue. And I want to thank all of the folks who participated in that discussion yesterday. It was really informative. And I want to remind everyone, the board and the community, that Nantucket is extremely far ahead of the curve on this topic. We have leaned out tremendously, far and ahead of even the regulators on this. And I think it's something we can be proud of and something we need to continue to do and be careful about where we go and make sure we're doing what's best for the town in the long run. So really, really proud of the work we're doing on this as a community.
Thank you. Does anyone else? Well, if not, we're continuing our work on the island home. We had 2 productive meetings yesterday, one with the board at Sherburne Commons and with only a couple of the neighbors came, but we did hold a meeting to start to introduce it a little bit further to the neighbors and get feedback. So that's just progressing. And we've got some more meetings scheduled, one on Monday with Sherburne Commons residents. And if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. I'll start with you, Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb.
Yes.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you. See you all next week.